Hey everyone, it's me, TheBladeGamer, of course, and I'm joined by my friend Eric, also known as TicTwitch.
Hi.
And today we are going to be doing a review of EA's press conference from E3 2017. So just to kind of give a brief overview of the press conferences, we are planning on making review videos for the rest of the press conferences. This was kind of a last-minute put-together thing, so I'm sorry that this is coming up a day late, but the rest should be on time. So without further ado, we're going to get into the content. And so the first thing that we wanted to talk about was the unsurprising emphasis on sports games in their press conference.
It was I cried a little bit at the start because there was no gap between it. They were relentless with the football.
Yeah, I mean the press conference started off with a football drumline leading into the reveal for the new Madden game. And it's not to say that I can't appreciate what sports games do, because sports fans love their sports games. But it just doesn't do it for the core gaming audience, I think. One thing that was interesting about the new Madden in particular is that they are adding a story mode like they did with FIFA at some point last year. So overall, it will probably be a better game. And I also think it's very interesting that they're using Frostbite now, which is really nice. It's EA's own like proprietary engine that they created for Battlefield. So I think the game looks nice, but it doesn't really do a lot for me.
My favorite part of that one was Brian's stream was a little behind, so he tabbed back in, saw Frostbite, was like, "Oh, is this Battlefield?" As like him and I were watching like football players play around, we're like, "Brian, what?"
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
But I have to say the new game does look like they put a decent amount of effort into it, and but honestly, like I could see myself maybe trying it, but besides that,
Yeah, like I'm okay on football, but even then, I'm not really excited for the game. Obviously, they had FIFA. No surprise, the story mode is returning once again. I'm assuming that it was a massive success, but the thing is that FIFA and Madden are always massive successes because there's just a large initial fan base that always buys games every year. So I wasn't too surprised by that either. Um, I think the big thing, I guess NBA was there, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense because NBA Live came out, I think, like a couple days ago or a couple weeks ago. So the fact that they even touched on that during the press conference, I think, was kind of like redundant and unimportant. But I
is
do
NBA Live the one where like you're on the streets and playing like street basketball?
know they used to have a franchise called NBA Street, and they did that.
Okay, so when they showcased that, that was a new game they were showing. Okay.
Right, yeah. So I guess NBA Street, if you're interested in that, that's coming back, or in some way, shape, or form. It might just be an update for NBA Live. I'm not really too sure offhand. Um,
To give you a bit of a gauge for how interested we were in, we used the NBA Street showcase as a washroom break.
yeah, yeah, it was great. I will admit that one thing that did kind of surprise me a little bit was that EA said that they're pretty much doubling down on their support for tournaments for their sports games. One, I didn't even know that competitive FIFA or Madden or anything else for that matter was a thing to begin with, because in comparison to games like CS:GO, Dota, LoL, Overwatch, etc., the games just don't have much of a following as far as esports are concerned. And so the fact that EA was like, we're going to be giving out more prize money, we're going to be having more tournaments, I was actually fairly impressed by that. But I think it's safe to say that no one will be living as a FIFA pro anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I will say that that was a good nod by EA, but it could have been improved upon. So now that we have the kind of sports stuff out of the way, we can now talk about something that was kind of expected, which was new Battlefield content.
Which was basically I believe it's called it was something of the Czar. I don't have the name in front of me,
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it
but
offhand either.
it was a focus of the Russian front of World War One, which
Yes.
gave them a bit of an excuse to also add in women characters for the multiplayer,
Hmm.
which was one of the major complaints people had when Battlefield One was first teased. But
Yeah.
of course, like historically, it makes sense that there aren't women on the battlefield. But in Russia, they had their one battalion of women fighters, so they gave them a bit of a grounds to do that. Obviously, Russia was also like the big portion of the war, so like it's not like they forced it. I know someone on the internet's probably going to get mad, like, "Oh, this is only because they wanted women characters, they're doing it." Yeah, or shills, like whatever. But besides that, like the content update looks pretty typical. Like it's some new weapons, a new front. They'll probably have like a new story add-on for it for a woman character in the
Yep.
campaign, I guess. But
Yeah.
besides that,
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised. Like we were expecting some Battlefield content, but we weren't sure if it would be a content update for Battlefield 1 or if it would be a new Battlefield game. Neither of us are into Battlefield. We just like
I uh I honestly expected a new game. I guess Battlefield 1's doing so well that they just kind of like I guess they expected it to do well and they're kind of sticking with it because
yeah.
like with Battlefield 4, Hardline came out like right after it, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly, but that's partially
And
because
Hardline was
Battlefield
also
bombed.
crap.
Yeah, 4 bombed because of like server issues and then Hardline came out, which also kind of bombed because it wasn't a true Battlefield game, but you know, it was something to kind of tie people over with until they fixed Battlefield 4. But yeah, I don't think either of us were really too surprised by new Battlefield content. I think we were both kind of expecting a new game, but like Eric mentioned, Battlefield 1 is so successful, there's really no reason for them to do anything else right now. Um,
I'm surprised with how successful it was. I didn't know it was doing so well.
yeah, no, it's ridiculously popular for whatever reason. I think a lot of core Battlefield fans are leaving the game because they hear it's not as in depth as 3 and 4 were, but at least strategically. But it's still really, really successful and popular right now. So the next game that we'll talk about is BioWare's new IP, Anthem.
Which
So
I just learned it was called Anthem. I didn't see a name the other day, so when I just like I called it Attack on Crisis Fall. Like there were suits, the suits opened up, so it looked like someone could get in the suit, and there was a giant wall that they kept on talking about for some reason.
yeah, so like everything in one sentence could be described as Attack on Titanfall, as Eric mentioned. Honestly, we're not going to get any information on this until Microsoft's E3 press conference because they announced that this was just going to be a teaser and gameplay would be shown during Microsoft's press conference. So, if you're interested in BioWare's new IP, watch Microsoft's conference. There's going to be a lot of info then, but as we're making this video, we don't have that information to go on, so we can't talk about it in more detail. I'm a bit skeptical of this game simply due to the fact that BioWare has been hit or miss for their last few games. Mass Effect 3 was considered fairly mediocre until they patched it and fixed the story endings. Andromeda is it's just not living up to the hype that it had. And then
The game came out like a buggy mess.
yeah, it
Like
came
if I recall.
yeah. I mean, I have not played Andromeda, nor have I played the Mass Effect series as a whole, so I have no right to really criticize the series. But based on what critics and users have said about both games, they have been more of a miss than a hit. And so I'm skeptical of this game being a commercial success if they continue down that trend. That being said, it's a new IP. They want to make a strong impression, so I feel like it is more likely to be good than it is mediocre. So I'm
We can
hopeful,
hope.
but that's honestly all I can really say about it.
The only thing I have to say on it is I do like the atmosphere. I do like post apocalyptic sort of like genres. So I feel like that's BioWare's strong suit at least.
Yeah.
They can make those games turn out well, or they have a better chance to, I should say, as the last few again have been more misses than hits. Uh, I'm really hoping that it's just not trying to leech off of Titanfall's recent success or Titanfall 2. I don't know how successful Titanfall 2 was. I do know it was considered a very good game.
Yeah, I can't speak for how well it sells or what its player base is like, but I think it kind of got squandered by Battlefield 1.
Yeah, from what I understand, it was considered like they completely corrected everything that was wrong with Titanfall 1, and the game itself is near perfect.
Yeah,
The issue is like the player base is just so small because not everyone went with it.
right. I feel like Battlefield took a lot out of that. So the next game, and I honestly think that this is probably the biggest thing that came out of EA's press conference, is A Way Out. So it's developed by the same studio that made Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons or something like that. Um, now I have never played that game personally, but from everyone that has played it, I've heard that it was a great story. And this game looks like it is going to deliver a great story, completely different story, but a great story nonetheless. Um, because it is intended to be a cooperative experience. It is very rare that any kind of big game is intended to be a cooperative experience. Usually it's tacked on last minute, but this is the biggest emphasis. And so one of the cool features about the game is one character might get stuck in a cutscene, talking to someone, doing something, while the other guy can walk around in the background and interact with that cutscene by doing things. They can throw a rock at something, make a sound, and then the people in the cutscene start paying attention to the sound that they made. And I think that's really cool.
Another thing with that as well, like a big thing to it, like probably the biggest thing to it is the game is split screen only. You can play it with someone in person or online, but it is always split screen. Like you will always be seeing what your partner is doing. And like Brian said, like if someone's in a cutscene, the other player, each character has their own story going on, regardless of whatever your co-op story is. So both players are interacting with everything on their own and together at the same time. Like it looked like it had such a good base for like a narrative to be built up on it, along with the fact that like the company who made Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Like I have a very high expectation for this game, and I think it has such a great chance to deliver so long as EA just doesn't churn it out that fast. Fuck, like it looks so good. Like I don't play narrative games like this, and like I really want to play this one.
Yeah, I completely agree, because there are tons of co-op games out there, but all of them are like competitive usually, and this is just a story-driven co-op experience, which is not something that we've seen for a long time. And it looks to be like a game that can deliver. I honestly think that the only thing that will hold this game back is the story, because it doesn't look like a game that would be plagued with bugs. It's really just going to be whether or not the story is good enough to kind of drive the gamer forward. And if they really nail that point, I think it will be a commercial and critical success as well. I'm really excited, and I think, as I mentioned before, I think that is the biggest surprise to come out of EA's press conference.
I feel like what will help drive its story is how much player choice comes involved. If player choice is a big thing within that game, like I'm looking forward to it immensely.
Definitely. So now that we're done with kind of the surprises of EA, let's go into some of the darker moments of the press conference, and that would be Need for Speed Payback.
I don't like driving games very much. And to be honest, I've never been a fan of the Need for Speed series, and this game just pretty much solidified my lack of interest was at like 0. It is still at 0 after watching the trailer for that thing. Like it was pretty uninteresting to me.
I think I casually mentioned in conversation with friends like the night before that I think it would be interesting if EA made another Burnout or Need for Speed game, just because it had been a long time since we saw a good entry into the series. And so when they announced, oh, there's a new Need for Speed game, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I wouldn't go out of my way to buy it, because I'm more of the kind of arcadey racing game kind of guy. So Mario Kart, Burnout, like back in 3 and Revenge, those days where it's super arcadey and not such a big emphasis on like, vehicle customization and whatnot. So I think that the game itself could be really fun. But I think the biggest turnoff was just the sheer level of cringe that occurred when they announced the game and some of the features in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They brought on who
sorry,
did they bring
continue.
on again? I can't remember.
Okay, so there's a YouTube personality that they brought on. When I heard YouTube personality, it was like, oh no, this has like the potential to be really bad. And we're gonna talk about this next. But it was the guy from Prank vs. Prank who came out, Jesse. And Prank vs. Prank has been around for like over a year now. I don't know what the guy does now. He's like a vlog channel. He's a vlog channel. They brought out a vlog channel guy to talk about it. And the best part about this is he fucked up his opening line.
Yeah.
So he stood there and quiet as he's like trying to introduce Need for Speed, and like the entire audience is quiet at this point too. And that lack of emotion in the game carried on to that trailer, I felt, because like the trailer, they're chasing down this truck, they're trying to get in this truck, and it's like a very intense scene, but like it was just so uninteresting. Like I just did not care.
Yep. And so honestly, that level of cringe, like Eric mentioned, it brought the room to a silence. Everyone was unenthusiastic after that. I feel bad for the YouTuber that they brought on because I don't know if it was the teleprompter screwing up or the lack of preparation in his speech that screwed it up, because that was just something that was really uncalled for because he screwed it up within the very first sentence. So it really makes you question what might have happened. And I think, as you mentioned, that tone kind of carried over through Need for Speed and left the conference room in a darker place that people were unenthusiastic about.
But I want to go back into the cringe for a second there,
Okay.
because I don't think it's fair enough to that one YouTuber, because it was not his fault for, like, he is not the reason the entire room was like set in that mood. There were many occasions that this conference just showcased that, like, not EA itself, but E3 still carries the cringe issues with every conference where, like, it doesn't seem like the companies understand how to run them at all.
Right.
And, like, I believe the biggest offenders usually every year are EA, Ubisoft, like those companies.
Yep. Microsoft too.
Because like that one YouTuber messing up his line was not the worst thing that happened.
No,
It was
definitely
pretty
agree.
bad. And the biggest one that stands out to me was when EA was talking about the esports stuff. They came out. This guy dropped 3 bombshells of information that was big to EA, like, we're funding these events, we're gonna have all these events with prize pools. When he mentioned that, the entire room was dead silent for about 2 seconds, and then you heard a quick laugh from one guy in the background.
Yeah, that
The
was pretty
room
great.
did not care whatsoever about this.
Yeah, I
He
completely forgot
does
about
seems to
that.
have this lack of understanding of who comes and actually watches their events, because the room had no interest in this whatsoever. And even then, like, you had the 2 soccer podcast guys come out after that, and, like, it was just worse. The only thing that carried those guys in the end was they have a bit of experience in comedy, so they could get the room laughing a bit afterwards. They came out, they screwed up their high five, or that was intentional. I don't know. A lot of people are saying that it was supposed to be unintentional, like they were actually trying to high five, but they screwed it up. I don't know. Like, EA has a huge issue with conferences still, and I think that, like, they still have yet to show me that they can run a conference properly.
Yeah, for sure.
I really just wanted to, like, make sure that was put out there, because, like, this conference was brutal to watch.
Yeah, it was bad. And so, as I mentioned, or the last thing that's really on this in this conference that we need to talk about is Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, I have not played the first one that came out 2 years ago, but Star Wars
Have you not
Battlefront
played
2,
it, like, at all?
I've
Like,
not.
even the beta?
I've not played it. I did not play it during the beta, and the only Battlefront game I've played was the original Battlefront 2 for probably about an hour or two.
Really?
Because it went on sale on Steam. I bought it, played it a bit, but that was it. And I wasn't too enthusiastic about it because it was at that point a decade old, so on and so forth. But Battlefront 2 seems to address a lot of the problems that they had with Battlefront 1, such as not having a story mode and not having multiplayer maps that were both high in quantity and also spanned all 3 eras. I think that the original Battlefront only had, 6 maps or something like that? So,
So the game that came out 2 years ago?
yes.
Yeah, it had a very low amount of maps.
So
it was bare.
It seems like they are really trying to address the issue of not having enough hero characters, not having enough maps, not having enough space battles, not having a campaign. Pretty much everything that makes a complete game, right? So
The only thing they sorry, I don't want to keep interjecting you here.
No,
but the only thing they haven't reintroduced yet, which a lot of people are missing from the original Battlefront 2, is Galactic Conquest, which is like a chessboard kind of map that leads into separate battles for, like, every planet that you're fighting around. It was a big thing for Battlefront 2. It was one of the favorite parts, the fan favorites from the series.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that.
They've managed to deliver on everything else. Like, they're showcasing this, like, space battles, campaign. Like, in the campaign, let me tell you, like, that, like, the trailers I've seen, it looks really good, and I'm really hoping it's not like a 4-hour, like, mini campaign.
Yeah.
But Galactic Conquest, if they include that in, and if they're waiting to, like, tease that right before release, I think they're going to have a very good chance of hitting all the right buttons to get this to be a great game.
Yeah, I honestly think that this game is what Battlefront should have been a couple years ago. This game does seem interesting. As a Star Wars fan myself, I would consider buying this game if it turns out to be a critical and commercial success. But based on the difficulties they had with the first game, I'm a bit more reluctant to splurge for this game. Um, and so I'm looking forward to it, but it's not something that's high on my list. One thing that I was really interested in about Battlefront 2 is the fact that they are shifting their DLC focus to be free.
You have to give EA a lot of credit for that because it's not just the first season of DLC as well. All their DLC for Battlefront 2 is going to be free.
At least they
At least all
alluded to
the
that.
not alluded to all DLC, but for sure all the map DLC will be free.
Yes.
So that was the biggest issue with Battlefront 1 was the not just the lack of maps, but when you come out with DLC like that, you start segregating your player base, and that's usually what kills games like that, like Call of Duty, Halo.
Yep.
When you get map packs out there, it segregates your game and it kills the player base, and that's what happened with Battlefront 1.
Absolutely.
If you look at the player numbers for Battlefront 1, it's atrocious right now.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like what they did after the flop that was Battlefront 1, it still succeeded commercially, but it was a flop amongst the fans. I think they kind of said, we're going to forget about making DLC for this game and completely focus on Battlefront 2. And I think that was a smart move on their end. In the end, I think that is a smart move because when you have one flop, you can't really just tack on fixes. It doesn't work like that. So I think what they're doing is smart. I think that having the first season of DLC being free is also smart. I think that if it's true that they will add new maps for free, it is also a smart move. And I find it oddly hilarious because EA is known as the company that started the season passes, that started the you have to enter a code to play online, and once it's redeemed, you have to buy a new one to play online. And it's like EA is known as this money-grabbing company, and for the first time in years, it seems like they are willing to give out content for free, which is huge. It's a step in the right direction, but it is by no means going to change how the industry views them.
Yeah, it doesn't wash away the sins of the past, but it's definitely a bright light for the future.
And so, for those of you who don't know, Finn and Captain Phasma are going to be the first unlockable DLC characters, which is kind of interesting because
they are free though, correct?
They are free. They at least announced that those two are free for sure. I'm interested to see how they play out because they didn't really get a whole lot of action and really you didn't see a lot of content from them in even the Star Wars film. Like you saw Finn a lot and he was, great comedic relief and did a lot of cool things, but you didn't really get to see him in action per se. So I think it's going to be interesting seeing how they play out in the Battlefront games in particular.
I think Captain Phasma was worse for that because all you got to see from her was her talk a couple of times and get completely wrecked by Chewbacca.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I think that those two characters in particular were kind of a, moment for me. I was like, why them? Not that I dislike their characters, but it was just like, why? When you have, a plethora of other characters that could be probably better suited. So, on that note, I think that pretty much wraps up all the game reveals at their press conference. So, if you were to give them a letter grade, Eric, what would you give their press conference?
Am I including cringe?
Yes.
C+.
C+. I think that's a little bit generous because I would be going... I mean, granted, I will admit, Eric is Canadian, I'm American. The grading scales are very different amongst us. I would give it a D+, honestly, because...
D+?
I would give them a barely passing grade because of the fact that they had a way out. They announced that there would be a new BioWare game, and they also seemed to correct their wrongs with Battlefront 2. Now,
I see. Like that's why I went with the C+ though. I think because I think they took the conference may have been pretty bare. There may have been a bunch of cringe. But at the same time, though, a lot of their actions had a good intent. Like, they were introducing the free DLC for Battlefront. Their games didn't seem to have anything tied to them. Like, A Way Out just seems to be a good game that's coming out soon. Unless I hear about the company being pressured to release early after, it gets released. I don't think it's going to be a bad game.
Yep.
The Crisis Fall one, when we see it, we'll see it more during the Microsoft uh, event. No,
Yes, we will.
yeah, that one I have high expectation for. If we see that, uh, I I imagine I'd feel pretty good about my grade of C plus if we see it and it seems to be a good game. And even with the Battlefront 2, the only pre-order DLC that's coming with it is also I think what gives us a hint for what they're going to do to make money off that game since they're doing free DLC, and that's a card system for the online multiplayer. And I think that's a pretty fair system. Who've played Halo 5 know what the card system in that game's like, and it seems to be okay.
Yep.
So I think it's a pretty fair system to keep the player base together, but also to give people something to spend money on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the
So
way that they're
I
handling
think
Battlefront's smart.
EA's heart is in the right place. I think they still need to figure out a few things that's going on. A C plus in my eyes isn't a very high grade, but I think they don't deserve just a barely passing grade.
All right, I'll give them a C minus. You've convinced me.
Hey,
Now they're barely above barely passing. So there you go.
perfect.
Um,
And now you have a higher expectation to them. You're like, I'm more invested now.
yes. All right, so I think that about wraps up our EA press conference review. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. We will be doing, as I mentioned earlier, press conference reviews for the upcoming press conferences. Those should be released more or less on time, but we look forward to hearing your comments, and we will see you next time.
Bye.